Hello, everybody. Welcome to the World of Concacaf podcast. We are here at the news desk. I am Eric Schmitz.
And I'm Jonathan Sleep.
And I'm Donald Wine.
And we're here finally at the end of this Copa America. We've got a lot to talk about. First, before we get started, I do want to send some love to our friends down the islands, throughout the region, everyone affected by Hurricane Beryl. I know Grenada got hit pretty hard. St. Vincent got hit pretty hard down in Union Island. I know in Grenada, they went since the hurricane hit on July 1st, they've pretty much been shut down. But good news, the Grenada Premier League kicks back off this weekend. So power to them for sticking through it and dealing with all the damage.
And peace to Houston, because Houston got flooded out as well by Beryl. Beryl's a bitch.
Yeah. Well, like up in Buffalo where my family is, like they had tornadoes down the street from where my parents are. So yeah, it's been a tough go for a lot of people, but a lot of serious stuff going on. But we're here to talk about soccer and mainly CONCACAF. So like the least serious thing we could possibly talk about. And speaking of least serious, let's talk about a tournament that's not even ours that, people thought it was a big deal. So we had a Copa America here. CONMEBOL decided they wanted to come make some money in the U.S. So after the rousing success of the 2016 Copa America Centenario, we had the 2024 Copa America here in the United States. I know, Donald, you went to a bunch of games. I went to a bunch of games. Jonathan went to one. I think we'll kind of save our experiential talk for the one more round. But
so if you're not a patron, and you want to know what is this one more round is what we do after we record this episode, where the three of us get a drink, get a little loose, and have some discussion. So first of all, shout out to all of our patrons right now. But also, if you're interested and you think you find what we talk about somewhat interesting, sign up for the Patreon at patreon.com/podcacaf.
And it starts at just $1 a month.
Yeah. Boys, you guys just, knock that out of the park.
We're good.
Love it. Yes. If you aren't already a member of our Patreon, make sure you sign up. We'll repeat that again at the end of the episode. But a lot of fun conversation about to happen there. But back to the tournament. So we had 6 CONCACAF teams participating in the tournament. We're just going to kind of run through how they all fared. In Group A, Canada finished the group stage with 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss, 4 points. They advanced to the knockout stage. In Group B, the 2 CONCACAF teams, Mexico and Jamaica, failed to advance. Mexico going 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss, and Jamaica failing to win a game. We will talk about both those teams more later in this episode, as well as the United States, who also failed to advance after 1 win and 2 losses. In Group C, while Panama in Group C advanced to the knockout stage, 2 wins, a loss, 6 points. And in Group D, Costa Rica, 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss, 4 points. So the 2 big success stories are really Canada and Panama. And for Canada, Jesse Marsch just taking over the head coaching role. I'm sorry, the MLS Canada men's national team head coaching role prior to the tournament. We're at the point in the tournament where Canada is effectively done. They advanced to the semifinals after beating Venezuela in penalties in the knockout stage, but fell to Argentina 2-0 in the semifinals. So they are playing a 3rd place game against Uruguay, a 3rd place game in Copa America. I don't know if there's anything that doesn't mean less than that. I don't know if I phrased that right.
The Gold Cup 3rd place game that only happened once and never happened again because it was so bad.
Yeah.
Because it was so pointless.
But Panama, the other team to advance, they had a tough go against Colombia, 5-0 loss. So Canada, the furthest advancing Concacaf team. Jesse Marsch, obviously off to a great start. Do we think we've learned something about Canada here?
No. And I'm gonna so I think it's all great. It's all fine and great that Canada made it through, but like let's talk about how lucky Canada got in the group stage. They scored a single goal in all three matches. They lost 2-0 to Argentina. They won 1-0 against Peru, but that was after they got to play 30 minutes up a man after Miguel Araujo got a red card in the 59th. And then they advanced after a awfully boring 0-0 draw against Chile, where they played 60 minutes up a man and got just only 3 shots on target. So like I just don't feel like, a lot of people like, isn't it great seeing what Canada did with a largely MLS roster because they were missing some key guys, but like I don't think we like really learned anything about this Canadian team because they got lucky. But sometimes that's what you need in tournaments. Like that's not a knock on them to an extent. Oh, it is to an extent. There's always shade being thrown to Canada.
Yeah,
but I just don't. I just don't think you can say that you really learned anything when of the 180 minutes you played in the group stage. Of the 270 minutes you played in the group stage, literally a third of that you played up a man, and in that time you only scored a goal, and your only goal came at a point when you were up a man. So like, pump the brakes, Canada.
Yeah, I mean, they have played 5 games in this tournament. They have won one of them. Is that a great tournament? I don't know, but they're also getting 6 games out of it. They're still playing up on the final weekend of the tournament. I think in the end, it's a massive win for Canada, just in the sense that they're getting the experience. They're playing some tough teams. They're finding a way to grind out results. I mean, two results against Argentina, both 2-0 losses. I think against the World Cup champs, that's okay if you're Canada. Clearly, they don't have a lot of depth. Jesse Marsch hasn't had a lot of time to instill any sort of system. And you can tell that as games wear on, there's lapses, but they're coming out organized and tough early on. So, I'm happy for Canada. They're getting some sort of like, I don't know, they're catching the country's imagination with the World Cup 2 years away. But I think as far as their actual competitive, I don't know. They still need some depth.
Look, I think there's a lot of things we could say about Canada, right? Let's start with this. You mentioned, Jonathan mentioned that they've only scored 2 goals in the entire tournament. They also gave up probably the wildest goal in the entire tournament in that game against Venezuela with that, what was it, 45-yard chip of Maxime Crepeau. Mm-hmm. But if you even go back to the 2 friendlies before the Copa America, they scored a grand total of 0 goals in those 2 games. Yes, sure, they drew France, but everyone's like, oh, they drew France. We drew France in 2018. It didn't mean much. It's one of those things where they have the best player in CONCACAF in Alphonso Davies. They have one of the best strikers in CONCACAF in Jonathan David. They have another great talent who unfortunately broke his leg, Tejan Buchanan, broke his leg right before, was it right before Argentina, right before Venezuela, one of those 2 games. It was right before Venezuela that he broke his leg in practice. And that's a shame. We really, I hope he gets back soon. But they have those 3 guys. They have a great, a pretty decent goalkeeper. We joked, but in all seriousness, they added by subtraction by not taking their captain Milan Borjan to the tournament. Yeah. And they had all these opportunities, and they had a coach who had a chip on his shoulder. He wanted this team to play with a chip on his shoulder, and he wanted them to go out and play inspired ball. I didn't see it. And a lot of people were saying that, because Canada advanced the furthest of all the CONCACAF teams, they're the kings of CONCACAF. I don't know what brakes you have in your brake pads. You may need some extra brake pads for the brakes that you need to pump on that, because if that is the indicative of CONCACAF. Reminder, the United States, who crashed out in the group stage, have played 2 fewer games than Canada and have scored 1 more goal. Like that's not inspired soccer. It in a results-based economy, right? Yeah, sure, they got the results that they needed, but don't don't piss on me and tell me it's raining and tell me that they're playing beautiful soccer and that this is a really good team that's come together under extraordinary circumstances. They have come together under extraordinary circumstances, but they have not played great soccer, and they should be the first ones to admit it. And yeah, sure, they get another chance to go out with a win and maybe get third place, but this is not indicative of what they should be. And if this is what they want to strive for, they're going to be humbled super quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And now the tough thing about a tournament like this is that you might have some overreaction. And I think what we're talking about Canada is like telling them not to overreact in the positive way. It's like, pump the brakes. You didn't necessarily, this isn't as great as it seems for you at the moment. There were multiple teams in CONCACAF who are reacting strongly to the results of this tournament. And I think we should just go right to it. Gregg Berhalter out as head coach of the U.S. men's national team. I think we can all say it was expected to some extent, but like it was needed.
Yeah,
go ahead, Donald.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think, going into this for the United States, similar situation that Canada and Mexico find themselves being that, there is no qualifying for these teams. Add into the fact that with UEFA Nations League, AFC qualification, CAF qualification, all of these other nations, there is not going to be as much time for these teams to face top-level competition before 2026. So we knew for a lot of these teams, and especially the US, that this was going to be, the real measuring stick for a post-World Cup Gregg Berhalter team, seeing how this team could evolve, what maybe things could be done differently in, the next cycle. And so, I mean, I think most people knew that going into this, that, getting out of the group was the bare minimum. You have a Bolivia team that is not gotten a result away from home since 2015. High altitude merchants, as our friend Vishal kept referring to them as.
They did get one result in Saudi Arabia in that FIFA series in March.
Yeah,
but that was the first time in a long
but no
time.
competitive. They have
Yes, competitive. Correct.
No competitive. And then they had Panama in that group that U.S. shouldn't be losing at home soil to Panama. We saw there being a terrible, not a red card from Timothy Weah that set the team back, forcing them to play 60-ish plus minutes, a man down, and even though they got the goal, they weren't able to hold on to it. And so I think if it's your CONMEBOL is your best competition that you're going to see up until the World Cup. And then if you're not getting those results, I think it was pretty expected with the U.S. getting knocked out that Gregg Berhalter was going to be gone.
The things that you just mentioned, right? The red card to Tim Weah, the terrible referee in the Uruguay game, just the atrociousness of some of the fouls. There was that stat that the United States had the most fouls or most yellow cards per foul of any team in the tournament, and all the CONCACAF teams were in the top 5, except for I think it was Panama was number 7, and all of those things are not Gregg Berhalter's fault. But when you don't get out of the group, which is a bare minimum thing to do for the United States in Copa America, that is how coaches get fired, and that is what happened. There was, in the end, the results were not there. The play was not there. And whether or not it was attributed to, you could pinpoint, where it went wrong, there had to be a change, and it was a needed change. I think Gregg did a great job to get us back to this point. Being in Cuba in 2017, we are at a much better spot now than we were back then, 7 years ago, before he took over. And so he got us to a point where we got back to the World Cup, we got out of the group and what have you. But we had all talked about this together. Second cycle coaches for the United States rarely work out.
I have a really bad track record.
Really bad. I mean, the last 3 second cycle coaches we have been fired. You know, that is the long and short of it. And at the end of the day, less than 2 years before the World Cup, they need to shake things up and try and reinvigorate the program, try and re-energize the fan base. We will talk about that in one more round. But I think at the end of the day, the results weren't there. And when it was down to his job or keeping it or going somewhere else, the federation said, hey, the results just aren't there. You're whatever's on your side is not really on your side. These results just aren't up to par and we're not where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
I would say, like, I think the other thing too, like talking about like some of the adversity that the U.S. faced, you know, especially like we think about the red card and the fouls in the Uruguay game, is like it wasn't as much the red card. It was like how the team performed and the adjustments that were made after the fact. That was the problem. They got the goal, they went up, but then didn't do enough to secure it. They could have won that game, and there was, I think there may have even potentially been some selection issues. But then the against Uruguay, they just they had 3 shots on target, but they never once. I never felt that a goal was coming. Being in that stadium. Granted, half that's you can't see as far as away, but it just never felt like there was something coming, and that there was very few ideas off of the bench, and I think that tells the biggest story.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know. I don't know if it's due to the results as much as the results were the final blow.
Yes,
because really going back to the Panama game, it's not that they lost the game; it's how they lost it. It was a failure of management to deal with the situation. And like you said, Jonathan, like selection issues, like they mismanaged the situation. They got the goal, like irregardless of that, it was 0-0 when Weo went off. And the subs that were made at halftime, the way the shape was, like the way he reacted to everything, it was a failure. And that failure put them in a situation against Uruguay. I mean, yeah, it never felt like they were threatening, but also we were all watching that game under the lens of this is an impossible situation.
And to put a B in this, I think, yes, all of that is correct. I also think the players share some blame in this, right? Like they didn't play up to their expectations, up to ours. They didn't play up to the best of their ability. There's a lot of mistakes on the field that, again, aren't Gregg's fault. This is not on Gregg Berhalter, all of it, right? But at the end of the day, the manager is the head coach is the head coach for a reason. And as we said, if you get grouped, that's how coaches get fired. He could go and say, hey, look, all these things happen that are not my fault. Guy sabotaged me, whatever. But at the end of the day, the result was we didn't get out of the group, and that was the bare minimum. And since you didn't meet the bare minimum, a change had to be made.
Yeah. Getting grouped in a tournament you're hosting.
First time that a host had been failed to get out of the group stage.
I push back a little bit on that stat because the U.S. weren't really the hosts. It was a tournament that happened in the United States, but U.S. soccer had no part in, or CONCACAF had no part in the organization of it. It was, so I would say not necessarily the host country.
Throw an asterisk on it.
Yeah, well, I want to get to that more later on. We'll wrap up the episode talking about that a little bit. But just to put a bow on Berhalter, I think it was Copa America was the final nail in the coffin. But going back to Trinidad, the failure to win there, how poor they looked in the Nations League semifinals, and then this entire summer,
the 5-1 against Colombia.
5-1 against Colombia. It was a trend with Berhalter, and I think they knew that they had to pull a plug, especially with all of the fan pushback. And I think the fan pushback might have been a key part of getting them to actually make the call here.
Let's not give certain people too much credit.
Yeah, we don't want to give certain people too much credit, but we're going to give ourselves some credit here. But we'll talk more about Berhalter on one more round, as if we haven't, teased that enough already on this episode. There's some other coaching stuff going on around CONCACAF. Another team that disappointed in Copa America and is looking for a new coach as a result. Much different situation. But Jamaica, Heimir Hallgrímsson resigned after Jamaica fell out winless in the tournament. He resigned and oddly enough already has a new job. Report in the Jamaica Gleaner seems to think that Hallgrímsson was angling for the job in Ireland for months. And when he quit and said, "Oh, I want to go back to Iceland," he was just really saying, I don't want to deal with Jamaica anymore. They're going to pay me 650,000 euros a year to go coach in Ireland.
I'm on you, boys in green.
Yeah. But like, where's Jamaica go from here? Hallgrímsson had a really good tenure there. They obviously showed a lot of promise. But now they are without a coach right before qualifying continues next year.
Here's the thing about Jamaica. I think Jamaica's performance was very disappointing because for the first time, I mean, minus Leon Bailey, who that drama that they had right before the tournament started, where they called him in, even though he said, "I'm not playing for you," and then they kind of said, "Oh, he's out now. He's suspended." So he's like, "Yeah, I'm suspended because I'm not coming." But that federation, we have talked about the issues that federation has had for almost 2 years now, right? Like they couldn't even afford to send their women's team to the Women's World Cup last summer. They had to get several GoFundMe's to fund their training and fund the actual trip to New Zealand and Australia. They have talked about some of the money issues facing that federation. Guys not getting paid. Leon Bailey has said that he had not been paid in 2 years or something like that.
He was paying for his own flights. He was showing up to training, and there wasn't even enough training gear for people to wear.
Right. They were paying for paying to rent fields, paying to get ball, going to sporting goods stores to get soccer balls so they could practice. Those are little things that guys are not used to. And this was supposed to be the tournament where they finally got all of their horses in, right? All those guys that they recruited from England and from Europe to come play for them. This was supposed to be the tournament that they put it all together, and that clearly was in the back and front of their mind as they played because they got dusted in these games. So I'm curious as to why. I mean, the Ireland part thing, my man was probably 1 foot out the door because they're like, it doesn't matter how much they're paying me. Ireland's actually going to pay me, right? There's a lot of things going on in that federation that needs to get sorted out.
Yeah, I'll just read this from the Jamaica Gleaner. The article was the title is "Acting in Bad Faith." Dennis Chung, the general secretary of the JFF, suggested that while the federation was hoping the Icelander would finish his contract, there was a smoking gun when Hallgrímsson suggested that he wanted to return to Iceland and be in Jamaica only for match days. He said, quote, "We are disappointed that he couldn't carry through with everything, but there could have been signs that this was coming. In January, he did indicate that he wanted to return to Iceland and come to Jamaica for the games. However, we didn't expect that it was because of another job that was being negotiated. We had a contract up until the 2026 World Cup, so now that this news has surfaced, a lot of things now make sense," he explained. Again, that's from the Jamaica Gleaner. Shout out CONCACAF Media.
It's like I said, there's a lot going on there. I don't know that we know the full story, right? Like we've gotten, the Jamaican Federation side, but Jamaican Federation hasn't had a lot of credibility over the last year and a half with regards to funding and other things that we just discussed. So hopefully they can get this together. Hopefully they can find a coach that will come in and right that ship because, like you said, they got Nations League, then they got World Cup qualifying, and they have a lot of this is probably the best chance that they have had since 1998 to qualify for World Cup, and it feels like they're blowing it.
Yeah. one thing that we didn't talk about when we were talking about Canada and success, and we just kind of touched on it. So one of the key successes for all of the teams participating in Copa America is the prize money. Every team that participated got $2 million. So Jamaica just got a check for $2 million. Huge for them, huge for this coaching search. But going back to Canada, we've talked many times and laughed many times about how broke Canada is.
Mm-hmm.
Just by advancing this far in the tournament, they've made at least $6 million in prize money just by getting this far. So it's been a huge, huge summer for Canada. I guess Jamaica is now in a good position to find a new coach. The report is that they are already in discussions with coaches around the world, and they're hoping to have somebody in place by August. What's that?
It's going to be Jurgen Klopp.
Listen, I was Jurgen Klopp. I'd rather be in Jamaica. But
if I'm looking for a retirement gig and I want to sit on the beach, it's not a bad setup.
Yeah, it's a good life. And one other coaching thing we want to touch on is the mess going down in Mexico. If you feel bad about the U.S. coaching situation, there's always Mexico to make you feel better about it. Mexico, of course, failing to advance out of the group in Group B, just with the one win. They beat Jamaica 1-0. Not a great performance for Mexico. But Jaime Lozano, who had taken over as interim last summer, became the permanent coach in August of 2023 after winning the Gold Cup with Mexico last year. Now there's discussion that he's about to be replaced. So the Mexican Federation is apparently talking to Javier Aguirre, the coach who coached them in 2002 and 2010 World Cups, about coming back to coach the men's national team through the World Cup. And they want to have Lozano be on his staff and an assistant, and then take back over after the World Cup. Now, El Vasco, as he's known, Aguirre, he just finished his tenure with Mallorca in Spain back in May. After falling in penalties in the Copa del Rey final, he is on the market, and Mexico, the federation that is the worst about handling coaches, is about to set a new standard for this summer in CONCACAF. What do you guys make of this for Mexico? Is this an overreaction?
Forget the overreaction. They literally are doing like a spouse swap. Like basically Mexico and Jaime Lozano were married, right? And they're saying, baby, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go on this fling for a couple years with my side over here. And then once I'm tired of them, yeah, with my ex-wife, right? And when I'm tired of them, then baby, we gonna get back together, and it's gonna be perfect, and we're gonna last forever. This is wild. Like when I saw the report about this is like, if I'm Lozano, I'm like, yo, here's what you can do with that assistant role. Here's what you can do with that 2030 World Cup qualifying cycle. Peace, and bonk out, because yo, you're trying to replace me. And then I'm supposed to sit in the wings and watch y'all do this together. It's basically in the room. Like he's like, yo, I'm in the room watching y'all do this for 2 years. And then once you're tired, he gonna leave and I can get back in bed with you. No, this is a terrible situation for Mexico. And on top of that, it's after right after they got eliminated, they went out and forced people no, Lozano's our guy. He's taking us to the World Cup. This is our guy. And then not 3 days later, they're like, but this other person that we used to have, he's cool too. We can get him too.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing.
We're just going to bring him in for, a couple years, let him do the thing that you're looking forward to doing. And then you can drive again.
You could try it again in 2020 after the World Cup.
In you can start the cycle for the 2030 World Cup.
Yeah. Do you think he actually thinks he would get through that cycle? Much less
no one
this
has.
Cycle.
Yeah, they've had 6 coaches this cycle. What are you talking? This would be number 7. What are we talking about?
Donald, the last thing that you said was what I thought was the funniest was because we were all the briefings coming out of this was Canada's not Canada. Mexico, like, they're really starting to get it together over here. Like, they're not gonna make that, knee-jerk reaction. They're setting themselves up for long-term success and getting the youth teams back on track and like all of this stuff. And I think it was the next day that it was like, oh, Aguirre may be coming in.
We were at the pregame for the U.S. Uruguay game talking about the fact that that Mexico had been eliminated, and they came out with the report. They had the whole they had the federation president standing there like triumphant, like defiant, like nah, this is our guy. And we're like, man, the team that is known for overreactions has decided to react sensibly. This is amazing. What is going on here? No, it was short lived. Like they just needed time to figure out who they were going to overreact with, and that person apparently is Javier Aguirre.
Yeah, I mean, he's got track record of success. Both World Cups he's coached them in, they've gotten out of the group stage. Still failing to play that fifth match. But yeah, Lozano, he gets the job because he wins the Gold Cup. He loses the Nations League finals, and then this tournament we're talking about, like, I don't know if Copa America is worth like quitting on somebody over. It's got to be like a pattern of things, and the stuff that we saw with Berhalter that built up to him getting fired over the results, I don't think we've seen that with Lozano. And
well, they did get mollywopped by Uruguay right before Copa America, and then they lost to Brazil, so they had a string of losses entering the tournament. I think going back, I think they only had one win since March of 2024.
Lozano's record with the national team is 10 wins, 4 draws, 7 losses. So it's not great. Berhalter had a better record than that. But yeah, that's a tough. They still haven't officially announced any of this. This is all, speculation and reports. But it does look like Lozano is getting kind of forced out with the World Cup around the corner.
He's getting put in the corner. He's getting put in timeout.
Yeah.
Well, everyone has ice cream. And then once they're done with ice cream, now you can rejoin the group. Yeah.
All right. So those are the big coaching changes going on. While we wrap up, I do want to just ask. So there's a lot of talk, especially with the host countries, that this was like the last best competition that some of these teams are going to have before the World Cup that's being hosted here. And it's a crucial time for the region. What did we learn about Concacaf this summer with Copa America? Now, I do want to preface this with some information. We talked about the refereeing a bit. I did want to note that compared to the last Copa America, the Centenario, which was organized more by U.S. Soccer and CONCACAF, they had more say in. This tournament featured less CONCACAF referees. There were more international referees for this tournament. I also want to point out that if you take the group stage alone, teams performed better in this Copa America than they did in 2016. That's based on points. That's based on goal differential. Same number of teams advanced, but obviously with Canada bowing out in the semifinals, 2016 was the US bowing out in the semifinals. Did we see any sort of growth with CONCACAF or the perception of CONCACAF this summer?
Not the perception. I mean, the perception that I'm left with is that CONCACAF has a lot of work to do to get ready for the World Cup. And it's not just the 3 that are hosting. It's all the teams, right? Like even Panama, right? Like Panama, I think did well to get out of the group. And then of course they got dusted by a team that they should have got dusted by.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, right? Like if you think about some of the surprises in this tournament, Panama was 1. Venezuela was 1. Venezuela won their group when they were probably picked to finish dead last in their group. But again, that's a team that you could see in the group stage of a World Cup that you're thinking, oh, Venezuela, that's great. That, because they expanded, you're getting the dredge of the of CONMEBOL, and Venezuela can come in and just bust you up, and that's what they did. So you learn that despite the fact that you look at Bolivia, hasn't won, and they've only won 2 games in 3 years or something like that. And again, one was in that FIFA series in Saudi Arabia, and the other was at home. So they haven't won a real game in a long time. That's one thing. But even Chile and Peru, those teams are still solid. They may not have gotten out of the group, but they're still solid. Venezuela, has improved quite a bit. Paraguay, still a solid team. And then you have
Ecuador's
right?
gotten better.
Ecuador gets better.
Colombia is like
arguably the best team in the world right now. Like that's how good they're playing.
Yeah.
They haven't lost in 2 years.
Yeah.
Uruguay has gotten much, much better. Like they're a more complete team right now.
Though they are better at fist fighting than playing soccer.
They can hum a glass bottle. I don't know if you saw that video.
Nope. I've seen all of them.
Bentancur can throw a bottle.
Yeah. There's been more than enough nonsense to feel at home during this tournament, but it does feel like the vibes are not nearly the same. Like it's not a fun nonsense. It is a stupid nonsense that we're getting in this Copa America.
I mean, because like you look at it, of your teams that played, only one of your 4 Nations League finals teams made it out of the group. 2 of your 3 hosts, like Don said, 2 of 3 of your host countries for the 2026 World Cup didn't advance. And so like it was not a great look for CONCACAF.
I mean, the problem is that in a tournament setting, there is a lot of random. Like you can't necessarily, yes, teams will play each other and you can see on the field whether they match up well. And there's a lot of luck involved and things happen during a game. There are red cards, there are injuries, goals happen. But the thing that I'm trying to look at positively for CONCACAF is that one of the teams that had to qualify for this tournament that was playing a play-in game in March went to the semifinals. It's like that is not a top 4 CONCACAF team that made it to the semifinals of Copa America with your Colombias and your Brazils and Argentinas. Like you can frame it that way, that Panama is even getting through. And you can maybe use that to write off some of the disappointment of the U.S. because with U.S. losing they played a tight game against Uruguay. They lost to Panama, but that's friendly fire. That's almost CONCACAF saying, yeah, even our best teams in CONCACAF aren't invincible.
I think the argument you just laid out is great for the soccer junkies like us, right? Like we're going to remember the stupid of this tournament. But when you look at the Wikipedia page for 2016, most people are going to forget some of the vibes of that tournament, right? But they're just going to look at the Wikipedia and say, hey, the United States won their group, right? Or, Mexico won their group. Here they're going to look back and they're going to say, United States didn't get out of the group. First, hosts, air quotes, since they started doing fixed hosts to fail to get out of the group. Mexico didn't get out of the group. Canada went to the semifinals. There's all these things that will become narratives down the line when people forget the details of this tournament. And I think that is what you're left with, right? The history books are not going to remember the referee who figure out a way to show a yellow card and then wave play on at the same time, right? You're not going to see it. You're not going to talk about the ref who apparently found out that time can be converted into Canadian money. So 4 minutes is really like 3 minutes and 46 seconds when he blows whistle. Like you're not going to hear about that 2 years from now, right? Just like, some people don't even remember what happened, all the details of the last World Cup, and that was less than 2 years ago, right? So you have those things that CONCACAF needs to build upon and say, hey, look, this was not a good tournament for us. Yes, we had a couple of bright spots, but some of the teams, obviously you want to look back and say, yo, CONCACAF had 6 teams in this tournament and 4 out of 6 got out of the group or something like that. Only 2 advancing is not a good look, because when you look back, they're just going to say, hey, 2 out of 6. One of them was Canada. They scored 1 goal. Like that's not a great showing for the region, but it's not the end of the world for the region either.
Yeah. I also do think we need to stress that this was CONMEBOL's party. They are the ones that kind of get to run the show here. and trying to validate yourself on their terms. I don't know if it's best for CONCACAF. I think there's a lot of opportunity with next year's Gold Cup to try to get some guest teams in there, kind of look at the format and see if you can learn something from how these Copa Americas have gone. If you can bring in some competition to kind of, test yourself and get more of these teams in CONCACAF involved, because it is kind of shitty that CONMEBOL gets 10 teams and CONCACAF gets 6. CONCACAF's got to do a better job of, just putting on a show for themselves, per se.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on Copa America? Something that we hope will never happen again.
No.
Well, I do hope it happens again. I just hope it happens. I hope the United States gets to participate in this in 2028. I just hope it's in South America.
Yes, that's exactly what I was gonna say. I had my finger up like Donald. I need to add to that.
You knew I was gonna say it.
Yes. I want to do that Copa America elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah, we shouldn't be taking I've seen a lot of very frustrating takes. People like, oh, we should just make this a US tournament in the US. Like, this isn't our deal. This like we shouldn't be taken from the South America. Like, this is an important tournament, and all of these people. The other frustrating thing is like all of these people, the QSMNT crowd, that likes to talk about the fact of like we don't play anywhere hard, we don't play teams away. It's because we keep being so receptive to these tournaments taking place in the U.S. and we should be more willing. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. But
Yeah.
I think they should be pushing more. Like, we'll help. We even help you organize it, but like, let's do it somewhere else.
But also, if you think about it, right? Like, I don't know where they have a rotation in the United States. I believe in South America for Copa America. I believe we took Peru's spot, air quotes, because Peru didn't want to host
Ecuador.
It
was Ecuador.
Well, no, it was Ecuador, and then Peru said we'll take it, and then Peru was like, we're not going to be ready for it. And so it became that's when the U.S. apparently came in and said, hey, got an idea for you.
Yeah,
but
come make some money.
2028. Obviously, I don't know who's supposed to have it next, but here's the thing: if it's in Paraguay, Argentina, or Uruguay, they are hosting the opening 3 matches of the 2030 World Cup. It would behoove us to want to go down there and scout out what it would be like to play down there in one of those countries. In South America in general, but especially if it's one of those 3 countries, what it would be like to go down there, what it would be like to be in a crowd atmosphere like that, because I promise you, they are going to engineer some way as the nation that travels the most for every single World Cup. They're going to engineer a way to put us in one of those 3 countries for this 2030 World Cup that is taking place on 3 continents.
I do want to point out that the Wikipedia for the 2028 Copa America does refer to a report from a Brazilian newspaper, O Globo, that says there's a prior contract between CONMEBOL and the USSF for the U.S. to host the tournament in 2028 as well. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but
I try.
I'm not paying fucking $200 for group stage tickets again.
Do you know how much? Do you know how much is going to be in 2028? It's going to be $500.
So dumb. Like, that is one of the frustrating things, is that these stadiums were not full for these games, because they could have been, and all it took was CONMEBOL being smarter about how they price tickets, because a lot of people got priced out, and a lot of people who really would have enjoyed being at these games didn't get the opportunity, and it's just greed. That I think the greed of this tournament is really what turned me off about the whole thing.
That would be wild for us to host Copa America in 2028, right before we host the Olympics that same summer.
Yeah. But I mean, the Olympics is in LA, so it's not like.
But soccer is played all across the country, so that's the one.
They're playing Olympic games. They're playing Olympic games.
They're playing Olympic games in Oklahoma
City.
Yeah, and Hawaii. So,
I mean, at least Hawaii is the West Coast.
Correct.
I'm sure Hard Rock Stadium will be available for Copa America. They can play as many games as they want there, and they will sell all the tickets.
Mm-hmm.
If you got Texas and Florida, they'll make enough money. All right, I think we'll wrap it up. I think it's time for one more round. I need a refill. We haven't got to the what are you drinking part yet of the one more round, but just shout out Boulevard in Kansas City. I'm drinking the Quirk Hard Seltzer Rocket Pop. That was good. Slugging down, in Kansas City. It was a good time. Donald, where can people find you and your podcast with your famous guests?
Yes, so USA Soccer Cast is my other soccer pod. Which covers the U.S. national teams, and also I write for Stars and Stripes FC, doing a lot around Copa America and the Olympics. You can find me on Twitter at BlazinDW. All of that's going to be posted somewhere on there.
You can find me at JSlape SSP. Maybe someday I'll write something for Broadway again, but don't. I'm in semi-retirement these days.
Yeah. You gotta write something about BJ Callahan taking over Nashville SC. Exciting times. Listen, there are only so many CONCACAF Nations League winning coaches out there. So it's exciting times for us here.
Only two.
Yeah. One of them's got a job. The other one doesn't. And yeah, follow us at PodCACAF, POD on all your social medias. And like we talked about at the top, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/PodCACAF. Really appreciate everyone for their support. Obviously, we know there's been a lack of content recently, but Nations League is right around the corner. So, we got to stick to our bread and butter. This fall is going to be huge. We're very excited about it. We're excited about you listening, and we appreciate you. And we're going to wrap it up right here. Thanks for listening.